And I worked here for 14 years. I worked at the water treatment plant, which is just outside of the parking lot that you saw when you came in. You are standing in the pumping station that used to supply water to the city of Woburn. This building was originally built in 1871. And in 1873, the first pump was installed in this building. And it used to be downstairs in the basement. You can't see it too well from here, but downstairs in the basement. Steam engine. And it ran off of coal. And back then in 1873, there used to be train tracks, which came right down next to the building and right out back behind this building. And there were giant sheds where they would store coal. And people worked here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they would run the engine. And what happened was the population in 1908 started getting a lot more people were moving into Woburn. So they needed more water to supply everybody water. So in 1908, they brought this pump, which you see here, Flat Iron Works steam engine, and they brought it all the way from Ohio. Everybody know where Ohio is? Yeah. They used trains and horses and carriages, right, to bring all these parts all the way from Ohio. And they installed this pump in 1908. And everybody see all these tools on the wall? All these tools came with the pump. It has its own special tool set. And downstairs in the basement, where more of this pump is, there's wrenches that are probably just as tall as you, downstairs hanging on the wall. So in 1908, when they started this pump, see this big flywheel right here? You see these square holes that are in it? What they would do is they would put long steel rods in these holes. And a couple guys would grab onto the pipe, and they would pull it. And they would keep pulling it until the engine started. And this ran until 1924. They used this steam pump. And it would pump 4.5 million gallons a day. Do you know how much water that is? That's about enough water to fill, I'd say, about 38 swimming pools every day. That's how much water it pumped. And it pumped it all the way up to the top of the reservoir, up at the mountain. Anybody ever taken a walk up there? See the old reservoir that's up there? And that's where they pumped the water. And then the water would go out into the city. See these old pipes out of here? These are tin water pipes. And this is what they installed in the ground. And this is what the water would go through, and it would go to everyone's houses. And then in 1924, they decided to go to wells running from electricity. Everyone obviously knows how electricity works, right? So they shut this pump off in 1924, and they went to electric-driven pumps that go down into the water underground.
Mr. Johnson, what are the squares for in the wheel?
Yep, that's what we talked about to start it, the rods. And all these pistons would pump up and down, and these belts would all move. And see all these little glass containers that you can see everywhere? Yeah. Those are called oilers. And what they would have to do every day is they would go around with a big jug of oil, and they would have to fill all these up. And as the pump moved, the oil would slowly drip down through these lines and keep the pump lubricated so that it didn't get too hot and break. And that's how they did it. And everyone knows about the Titanic, right? Yeah. The Titanic had engines just like this, just a lot bigger. They looked very similar to this, but there was 4 of them, and they were a lot bigger. And everybody see the snowshoes that are up there? Someone always worked here 24 hours a day. There used to be also little different stations out on the property that they would have to walk to and check. So in the wintertime, rather than take a truck or anything like that to get to where they had to go, they would put the snowshoes on, and they would walk around through the snow to all the different well houses.
Is it a different
on the property?
Mr. Johnson, are there any ghosts in this building?
There is. There's a few, and I've actually had an experience with one, but his name is Edward Pollard, and he used to work here from 1903 to 1924. He was the head guy. He had a house outside, just outside here. It's not there anymore. And he lived outside, and this was his pump. He took care of it. And a lot of people say that at nighttime, if you're here, you can still hear him walking around through the building, making sure everything's okay. And I believe it. Anybody have any questions yet?
I find those aren't real.
You don't think so?
No, those are absolutely not real.
Well, yep.
What
Over here, they would probably run out of water, and then people wouldn't be able to brush their teeth or take showers, stuff like that. Yep. How do you get your feet in them? There's like leather belts, almost like that you would wear in your pants, just smaller. And you put your shoe on it, and you belt your shoe right in around it. Yep.
What's that thing?
What's that? Those rods right there?
No,
Oh, that's the governor. And what that would do is, as this wheel spins faster and faster, those two balls that are connected there rise up. And what it does is it maintains the speed so that it doesn't spin too fast and break itself. Yep.
I know, I think sometimes it might maintain electricity in the system if it goes too fast.
Well, this one didn't run off electricity. This ran off of coal that they would throw into the boilers, and the coal would burn, and it would create steam. And the steam would come through these pipes. See that pipe right there? That's the steam pipe. And the steam pipe would come into the boiler. And once you got this wheel spinning, the steam would shoot through the pump and keep it going. Yep.
So it's like steam from electricity?
No electricity. It didn't use any electricity,
No, but
just steam.
Like electricity goes steam.
Yeah, it was very similar, yep. And then they went to electricity because it was more efficient. Yep. No, this has not been used since 1924.
There's a question back there.
Yep.
Why would people go up the stairs?
There's more oilers. Remember we talked about the oilers there? There's more. There's a whole bunch more up there. And this one I have here, right? This is pretty cool. This is the original logbook. This is the book, right? What does that date say right there?
1891.
Yeah, this is the book that they used when they first built this building. They would log everything in here that they did every day. We still have it, we keep it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, very much. Everybody all set? Any more questions? Can Mr. Johnson go about his work?
Well, you guys, can you all say thank you?
You're welcome.
Okay,
Enjoy the rest of
guys.
your day.
Tell your parents.
Does anybody know what this is? Come on, what is it? It's called the ventilator cowl of the USS Maine. Do you know what the USS Maine was? What? A battleship.
Part of the ship.
People thought it was a whale's tail that got crooked, but it isn't a whale's tail. It's made out of iron, and it came from the USS Maine, which is the second battleship of the United States Navy in 1898. And you know what happened? The United States was about to go to war with Spain, and this ship was in Havana Harbor. And what happened was it blew up in February of 1898, and 200 and how many soldiers does it say? How many sailors? 264 sailors perished when it went down. But the Americans were so upset that in 1900, the United States went to Havana, Cuba, and brought it up. And they brought it up, and so that they sold pieces of the USS Maine to various cities in the United States. And Woburn is one of the few places in the United States that has developed USS Maine. And it's been here 100 years. So this honors all of the sailors in the Spanish-American War that died on the USS Maine. And this is going to be rededicated on Sunday. Sunday, it's going to be rededicated. Brand new. It's all written statue. So I hope you see it on Sunday. You'll come and see the USS Maine. And now it's a Civil War monument, okay? The Civil War was between what? The Northern Where we live, what are we? We're the North. So what do you think that soldier is? What army did he belong to, do you think? What is it called? You know what the North is called?
Yes, Yankees.
We are Yankees, aren't we? But this is the Union soldier, and the South would be called the Confederate soldiers, or from the Confederacy. This Union soldier represents 750 Woburn men who served in the Civil War, of which 82 died in the Civil War from wounds or disease. This statue was dedicated in 1869, and Woburn had in the Common, and it didn't have all of the statues in the memorials, you see, but it had this one, the first one. They had over 50,000 people who came here to see this dedication because it was such a healing process for the end of the Civil War. Did you see the star? Burial ground of Woburn. It is the 20th oldest burial ground in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our founding fathers are buried here. There's no markers for them because in 1849, down by the wall, where you see the wall, when we came up, you saw how it went up high, then it dropped down low. Yeah. They decided to dig out what was there and put in a pound, not for dogs, but in the old days when you used to go to the First Baptist Church, you had to tie your horse and your carriage up, and they needed a place for that. What happened, though, is bodies came out as they dug that. And those are probably some of the early founders, they think. So they just picked up their bones and moved them in the back. What we're doing, just so you know, does anybody know what GPR is? Ground Penetrating Radar. And the city has just started doing a program that we started Monday. This is the first burial ground. The second burial ground is on Montville Avenue by the Bolodrome. Do you ever go by it and see all the graves?
Yeah.
And what happens there is we have a gentleman who's going to go with his machine up and down, and he's going to find all the missing graves of all the early settlers that was here, or dig up all their stones so we can find out what we have here. But you know who is here? 15 Revolutionary War soldiers. The second burial has 51. But the Revolutionary War soldier that I want to tell you about is over here, Daniel Thompson. First of all, do you see the obelisk? You know what an obelisk is? It looks like a pyramid at the top. That is the obelisk, the tomb for the Baldwin family. Did you learn about Loammi Baldwin? Yeah. And that's where they're buried. There's like 18 family members buried up there. It's up there.
Are we going to go?
No, honey, you can't climb up there. You'll be all out of breath. You'll be all out of breath. That's a high hill to climb. But down below, in that flag that you see straight down, that's where Daniel Thompson is buried. And do you know who Daniel Thompson was? From Woburn? These are all Woburn people. Do you know who he was? No? Do you know about the Revolutionary War?
Yeah.
All right, when did it start? Tell me the date.
What was the first battle of Lexington?
Battle of Lexington and Concord. When was it?
April 1979.
And we celebrate what holiday? Patriots Day. And you know why that is? Because of the patriots who are buried in this cemetery. Daniel Thompson, he heard the alarm on April 19th. You know, Paul Revere's coming out. He's warning everybody. Another guy came to Woburn and warned Daniel Thompson. And Daniel Thompson, in turn, he went and warned 280 Woburn people, and they gathered in Woburn Common. And they headed up to Russell Street. You know what Russell Street is in the Four Corners? You go up that big hill. You know what Battle Road is there? You know we have Battle Road that goes into Lexington and Concord. They headed into Lexington Green, but the battle had already happened. And 2 Woburn men were already there. And the soldiers who were killed, the farmers really, and they were already dead. So our Woburn soldiers under Colonel Baldwin headed to Lincoln, Mass. Well, Daniel Thompson was quite a marksman, and he was, you know what a grenadier is, a British grenadier? Do you ever see them in the big red uniforms, the big furry hats on their heads?
Yeah.
Well, Daniel Thompson, he got kind of killed, a few of them. So one of the grenadiers hid in a tree, and he went behind him in a barn and shot him in the back. And this is our first casualty, military casualty from the Revolutionary War from Woburn, is Daniel Thompson. He had 5 children, he was married, he made the great sacrifice for our freedom, didn't he? Now another death happened that day, and it's this gentleman right here, the second little flag that you see there. What do the flag means on the grave? Do you know what the flag means on the grave?
They were important in the Revolution.
No, not necessarily. It means they were a veteran. They could serve any war. You see a flag on a grave, that means it's a veteran, right? But this gentleman gets one because he really is the first casualty for moving. You know what he was? A farmer. And he was selling his eggs, and he was headed into Cambridge. And he was Josiah Richardson. Well, the British caught them because they were headed to Lexington, and they held them. And what happened was, they heard the firing on the green. And the British said, you know what, we're going to let you guys go, the two Woburn guys. But you can't run away. But you know what one of them didn't do? Equite, he didn't listen. And that was Ashel Porter. And they shot him in the back. And then Josiah Richardson from Woburn, he listened, and he walked away, and he went on to serve in the Revolutionary War as a big hero. So he's the first non-combatant, that means someone who's not a soldier, to die from Woburn in the Revolutionary War. Now, do you know that here in this cemetery, we have the descendants of 8 United States presidents are in this cemetery? Can you think of what presidents, relatives are buried here? No. Good guess, though. Good guess. Anybody else? What? No, good guess, though. He was from Illinois.
He's the president.
No. How about Calvin Coolidge?
John Adams. John Adams.
That's a good
No.
guess.
Cleveland?
John Adams.
No. Harrison? Hoover? Pierce? Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
Whoa.
The 2 George Bushes. All of their relatives are buried here. Did I say 8? I can't remember. But they're all relative. Their ancestors are all colonial relatives. So this is an important place, don't you think? I think we need to take better care of this, don't you think?
Yeah.
So we're working with the city and trying to get that to happen. Because it's, you know, people have broken the stones, thrown paint on some of them. That's disgraceful. Would you want that on your family stones?
No.
Well, they don't either, just because they're not here to tell us, right? So that's our job.
There's one all the way down there that's like completely.
Yeah, a lot of them are broken, aren't they?
Over here is a grave site.
Yeah.
The first doctor in Woburn is buried there. I want you to tell me, you got one guess. What was that doctor's first name? No helping. It was Dr. Susanna Richardson.
That's close.
She became Dr. Susanna Richardson Brooks.
That's close, right?
So Susanna, how many boys would have guessed that name?
Me.
Do you want to know
How many boys would have thought it would be a woman? Yeah, just
I'm
I
like
thought.
halfway there.
Do you know what she did and why she was famous?
I'm like halfway there.
She was one of the founders that came with the Richardsons and Miss Captain Johnson into the wilderness. She was one of the wives. And they didn't have any doctors. They had no medicine. They had nothing. But what happened was, there was an Indian... You got to turn that off, right? Thank you. So what happened is, there was an Indian raid. Remember I told you there was some nasty Indians that were kind of mean, and then there was the friendly Indian tribes?
Yeah.
Well, what happened, there was a raid between these 2 types of Indian tribes. And the bad ones, they massacred the good ones. And they did it, you know how they did it in the 1600s? They had tomahawks, scalping, you know, it was kind of nasty. Well, there was a Woburn soldier who ran a militia, and he went up towards Chelmsford where this happened, because Chelmsford was very, very close to Woburn in those days. And what happened was, he found this little girl about 12 years old, a little Indian girl, and she had been scalped, and her head had been cracked open. But she was still breathing, and he couldn't leave her there, right? You could never leave her there. So he brought her back to Woburn, and Susanna Richardson Brooks, because she was married after her husband died, Mr. Richardson, and she lived down by the pond. She had all this herbal medicine. She took this little girl in, and what she did was she cured her, and she saved her. It took her 2 years to get her back to health, but she went on to live and become a teenager and a young woman. So from that time on, she was considered around colonial Massachusetts as Dr. Susanna, that she had this great power to heal. So it must have been real tough in those days, don't you think?
Yeah.
I don't know if we could do it, huh? Well, I tell you what, we're going to move on now, and we're going to say goodbye to the first burial ground. But you're going to remember the special place, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, dear. This is the Burdett Mansion. This is where the home of the Woburn Historical Society is. And we always have exhibits. Last year we had an exhibit on World War I, and this year we have an exhibit celebrating and honoring all the men and women who worked in the tanneries in Woburn. You know how we have the tannery logo at Woburn High School? They say the tanner?
Yeah.
And it's that bull?
Yeah.
Now that's not what it is. If you turn around, you see those men over there? You see the men in the pictures? That's what a tanner is. See the hide that you see there? That's a real hide. What kind of hide do you think that is? Cow hide? And what do you think they made leather from? Cow hide. How do you think they got the leather from that to a leather belt? How do you think that happened? They did. And you know how they started though? See those men over there in that picture? They're standing over those vats. That's all. Are we all listening? They stand over those vats, and that vat is filled with chemicals and lime. Very dangerous. It was dangerous work. And if they fell in that, they would die because that is lime. But they would take a hide like that, okay, and they would dunk it in there for like 4 or 5 days, and then they would pull it out, and Mr. Solis has the hook. And so one man would take that hook, and now that skin weighed 60 pounds going in the water. It weighed 100 pounds coming out. So a lot of these poor men had, back aches and, arm aches, everything bothered them. And so that was very dangerous work. And then they would take it, and if you look here, you'll see the shaving knives, and they were called fleshing knives, and they would take the skin right off. So by hand, they had to take the skin off, which is in the picture. You see the picture? It's kind of gross, really, isn't it? It's kind of gross? Right? That's gross work, and that's hard work. It wasn't easy work, right? They had to work. And then they would take it over here, and they would finish like that man in that picture. And you know who started and did all these tannery work? In the 1840s, we were mostly farmers. Everybody had a farm. But then the tanneries came. Are we all listening? Guys, sit down. Thank you. And what would happen is, we had 26 tanneries in Woburn. And in the other room, you'll see where we went from tannering to the biggest shoe manufacturers like Lynn is and Lowe, big tannery. But these tanneries were very hard work, weren't they? You wouldn't want to do this all the time. You see this picture up here? Do you know where Walgreens is, down the south end? Yeah. That's what was there before Walgreens, that tannery. Now look at the size of it. Can you see all the hides over here drying? So when they pulled them out of here, they put them on those racks. See it? They had the trains ran right through that area. This whole area is probably from St. Charles all the way down to Winchester line. And there were 500 men that worked here. Very hard work, like those guys that you see here. See this one here, these pictures here? You know the Woburn Parkway? Yeah. You know when you go into Woburn Parkway from like Pleasant Street, the Maine, and you look down and see that strip of green land? Yeah. See that beautiful green land? That's what's buried underneath that tannery. Because it blew up and been on fire in 1893. And all of it, they just dug a hole and buried it all there. But that wasn't a tannery. Tanneries had to be where water was. You know how Woburn had trouble with their water? It's because the tanneries had to be near water. They needed it to process and make leather. And during the Civil War, we made some of them. We were the biggest leather manufacturers during the Civil War with the belts and our boots for our soldiers. You learned about the Civil War, right? The soldiers, just a little bit. Terrific. So why don't you look around? These are all tanneries in Woburn. And if you go inside, you'll see other products that are made from the tannery and the leather and the shoe business.